my problem. Anyway, let's do it.
Hello guys, welcome back to Carnivore Team GB live Q&A session number 21. Today we're going to be answering questions that you'll have about autoimmunity today. So we've actually got a great big panel on board today. Myself, Ben, Phil, Coach Stephen, and Lee to answer any questions you have related to autoimmunity. So we'll be prioritizing those questions as they come up. So if you do have anything or any loved ones that have certain experiences you want to give us to give our anecdotes and different things, then by all means ask the questions. Super chats will be prioritized as well, of course, which is very helpful towards us and our channel. It also means we can get a piss up at some point later in the year, perhaps, if we get enough. So hopefully that will helps. Anyway, so I'm just going to put this on the screen first from Zbigniew, which is hit the like button. Absolutely imperative towards the stream. Helps it spread our awareness of our talks. And also we've got a question here, which will we're actually getting to straight away, actually, just because we've got an hour today. I don't want to get too far overrun. The question is from Sully126, and it is, how does getting into ketosis or PKD help with healing the gut, which seems to be at the forefront of autoimmunity? So I might give this one to Phil first, just because this is his area of expertise, which probably he must have the most experience on, especially when it comes to PKD. So Phil, what's your take on it?
Personally, I think ketosis is secondary to getting enough fats in so that you're not taking in so much protein, which can also get through a leaky gut, which can also trigger symptoms. Even if it's really healthy protein, like beef or lamb, in the short term, it won't ruin your gut or anything like certain other proteins, but it can cause issues if you're eating too much protein. And I always see Jofia reading blood results and going, "You are eating too much protein," and she can kind of see it in the results. So ketosis, I mean, it can really help in many ways because it is the body's preferred. Ketones are most of the body's preferred fuel. And anything that contains carbohydrates is also irritating to the gut. The actual biochemistry of why ketosis is in itself beneficial, maybe somebody else can get into. But to me, it's really secondary. Although tracking your ketones, which paleomedicina do if you're one of their clients, can be very useful in seeing that you are eating the correct diet in the first place. I don't know how important it actually is in itself. Has anybody else got any ideas on that?
Well, I'll ask Stephen on this and perhaps Ben, and I'll just fill in at the end because this isn't really my specialty. But Stephen, what's your take on this kind of question?
Well, it's probably different to most people. The polycystic kidney disease, just so people know what that is. I mean, you're just talking about fluid-filled cysts in the kidney. The mainstream medical people say that it's genetic.
I think it's meaning paleo-ketogenic diet.
Well,
paleo-keto.
I wanted to just establish what they were talking about here, because that jumped out at me as like, what are we talking about? So they're talking about the paleo-ketogenic diet, yeah?
Yeah.
We're 100% certain on that. Right, okay. How can it help leaky gut? Well, leaky gut is down to inflammation. And if you take out insulin, you have lower levels of insulin, you have lower levels of water retention, you have less expansion of the gut lining. And it is literally less leaky. And your tight junctions are tight because there's less inflammation and there's less insulin in there, allowing things to get into your system. And we know this is what happens because in your peripheral, where the blood vessels are not bound by tight junctions, you can see that the diet has even an effect on that and actually makes them a little bit tighter, even though they're not meant to be tight. So when you compare somebody that is on a high carbohydrate diet, like a 60% carbohydrate diet, they will have more trouble with their leaky gut purely because of the high levels of insulin and also with water retention. which comes with all that glucose, and also the fact that once you've got that glucose and the water retention, then you retain even more sodium. And most people, if they're in ketosis, don't have any of those things. I mean, it's that simple. When you get into ketosis, you are eliminating carbohydrates, you're eliminating those higher levels of insulin, and you are living on a sort of higher protein diet, aren't you? I mean, that's basically a higher protein than the average person that's eating 60% carbohydrates, and you're eating more fats. So I just think it's sort of the environment you're putting into your body is conducive to healing, really.
Nice. Ben, do you have a take on this at all?
I don't think there's any way that ketosis like directly helps healing leaky gut. There's a couple of indirect. Obviously, to get into ketosis, it helps not to eat a lot of crap that causes leaky gut. Is one thing. So you're not eating beans and nuts and stuff that contain lectins, which are, top of the usual suspects. There's lots of other things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. If you're eating a healthy diet and you're reducing inflammation, you're not going to be less likely to take NSAIDs, which are horrible for causing leaky gut and directly do. I don't think the oral contraceptive pill has got anything really to do with ketosis. However, one other aspect could be that we know that stress is a factor in leaky gut and prolonged stress. Now, being in ketosis makes you smarter and wiser. And so possibly, but again, it's another quite indirect pathway there. So but I think, having your brain working better and being less of a stress monkey and also being less stressed about eating all the time might be a slight influence. But no, I think on the whole, ketosis is good for you. Healing leaky gut is good for you, but they are pretty much different things in my view.
Fair. What about you, Lee? What's your experience on this sort of thing?
My take on this is that, okay, so my understanding is that with autoimmune issues, right, we've got permeability in the gut, which is caused from certain metabolites, egregious metabolites in plants. You've got lectins. Alcohol can cause permeability, seed oils, nuts, all this stuff, grains, plant proteins. So the idea is that the other molecules, potentially from the same foods or other foods, can slip through leaky gut. It's now in circulation, it's caused inflammation. The immune system comes along and tries to help, just like cholesterol, sort of bandaging itself up to try and repair. But the consequence is that it's also attacking healthy tissue. And then wherever that healthy tissue is, that's your certain individual set of symptoms and whatever, inflammatory bowel. Mine was inflammatory bowel disease, but autoimmune disease, wherever it's attacking the healthy tissue is where you're going to have your problems. So you want to, first of all, take all of the foods out that are causing permeability. And you also want to heal and stop consuming things in plants that can slip through leaky gut. So essentially, that's a carnivore diet, but more specifically, the PKD, the idea, I think, around it is that we want the very therapeutic effects of ketosis while also getting adequate nutrition. And so we don't want to be consuming too much protein because you're going to come out of ketosis. You want that therapeutic effect of high fat. So around about 75 to 80% of your calories should be coming from animal fats, mostly from ruminant animals. Stay away from dairy because dairy can both cause the casein proteins can cause leaky gut, and homogenized dairy and things like that, particles can slip through leaky gut. So if you have autoimmune issues, no plants, no dairy, 80% energy coming from fats, 20% coming from protein. That way you maintain ketosis. My understanding is also the protocol for PKD is often to include strategically the right amounts of organ meat so that way you're getting enough nutrients that you are now not getting because you've lowered your protein so much, and certain nutrients found in the skeletal structures, of the muscular structures in the meat and stuff like that, certain nutrients you're now not going to get enough of. Do you see what I'm saying? So my understanding is that you want to be in ketosis for that therapeutic healing effect so that you're healing better. And you still want all of the nutrients that you need. So that's why I think organ meats and things like that, but perhaps not too much liver, So, I mean, if it was me, I've obviously been healed of mine in a sense because I've had my whole colon taken out. That's where I had my weakness. But I think for anybody that's in dire straits, they absolutely want to take plants out of the diet. Obviously, highly processed food, seed oils, legumes are a nightmare. Alcohol goes without saying. Quite quickly into a carnivore diet, and then you want to modify that carnivore diet to look more like a PKD with that protocol. And that way you're going to mend and heal your leaky gut while you're still giving your body all the nutrients it needs. And that's it, really. That's my understanding. I think that's the benefit of also being in ketosis, not just being on a carnivore diet, for example, because, you know, quite a lot of us, me also, I sit down and eat a kilo of meat, and sometimes that's way too much protein. I'm not going to be in ketosis, and I'm not going to get quite those same effects. It might be the same kind of strategy with cancer. You don't want to then be eating all of this protein, because it's got to come from energy or carbohydrate. So when it's just protein and it's too much, it's going to be metabolized as carbohydrate. And so you want to gravitate more towards very high fat. And as far as I understand as well, I think that Sophia Clemens, I think she says something like animals with 4 legs. So I think she even promotes pork and things like that. It's especially high in B1 and D3, K2. D3 has been shown to help dramatically, but not unless you take all of the culprits out. And coincidentally, that's all plant matter, basically.
Yeah,
nice one.
Yeah, so Sophia says pork's okay, basically because she lives in Hungary and she gets all the maggots of pork, you know, that's fed the proper stuff. But I spoke to her about that, and she said that, you know, I said, well, in England, do we want to be eating pork? And she went, no.
Right.
Probably not. But I even react to the PKD pork, you know, the sort of the maggots, the stuff that comes over from Eskimo Kitchen. So I wouldn't really recommend it if people are in England and they really want to definitely heal. But it's spot on about the organ meats, just a little bit here and there. It's pretty much your vitamin pill when you're healing the gut, you know, maximum nutrition for minimum bulk.
Exactly.
And yeah, spot on.
And maybe later on down the line, you could then come off of the organ meats and eat more of a normal looking carnivore diet, because once you've healed your leaky gut, then you can modify you back to a regular carnivore diet and eat just the way perhaps I am at the moment, you know?
Yeah, and if you eat too much of those organ meats, you end up, you know, like certain chaps that we know. Who started piling in the pineapples.
Yeah. My only thing to add to that at all, when it comes to tracking ketones or being in a high state of ketosis, is that it gives you an objective marker to go for, and it keeps you motivated. Outside of that, there's very few clinical uses where you'd actually absolutely have to look at your ketone level and think, okay, it needs to be between this and this at the moment. I largely see it as more of just a thing to look at, but not necessarily something to go by as a hard and fast rule. One benefit that you guys didn't mention was how the beta hydroxybutyrate, sodium butyrate actually, or butyric acid, which comes from butter, is actually beneficial to the endothelial lining in the gut, and it helps feed the colonocytes. There's hard science on that, which actually indicates it's very helpful. So if anyone does have Crohn's disease, for instance, that can be something really useful. Then again, if you have lots of butter in your diet and you're intolerant to butter, don't have it. It's obvious. But people that do tolerate butter seem to benefit from adding it into the diet. And I experienced this myself countless times. My gut is always much better if I include butter. My gut is always much better if I include butter in it, because it's got the highest amount of butyric acid in it per gram. The next best is probably goat's butter, but it's about a third as much. You don't get as much bang for your buck. And one interesting thing is a lot of bodybuilders now are suffering with a lot of digestive issues because they're pushing up the weight too much or eating too much food. And a lot of them are thinking, okay, how do I improve, how do I reduce intestinal permeability? And it is through things like sodium butyrate, which you can buy as a supplement, but it's much cheaper to get from butter. So I wish these guys would switch from their bloody extra virgin olive oil to butter as a fat source. It's much more beneficial. But that's pretty much my take on it. But I completely agree with everything everyone else said. I think Lee definitely went into some really good detail. How it's not just protein and fat, it's how the accumulation of giving yourself what your body does need in terms of the fat amount and the protein amount. I think largely speaking, you don't need to weigh everything, but if you make sure you do what Phil usually says, which is like a third of your plate being fat and the rest being lean meat, you can't go too far wrong. It's hard to. I know Ben's probably mentioned this in a previous podcast that we've done, but yeah, it's that with lipivores mostly. We're sort of designed to get most of our energy substrate, or fuel in general, just from fat, which is obviously most beneficial to the gut lining. Does anyone have any sort of extra bits to add onto that at all?
No, just a little one, probably jump in the queue, because I've just seen it pop up here, and I know Leslie Devlin says, how much organ meat a week is best? Is 400 grams of liver too much? No, Leslie, that's spot on. That's pretty much exactly the amount that paleomedicinists say to have. And then once the gut's healed, you can taper that off. But I wouldn't eat much more than that. There's so much nutrition in it. 400 grams of liver, exactly about right, I'd say.
Fair, yeah. So now our next question is from Nancy Chandler. How can one eat too much protein? Ben, what's your take on too much protein? What have you found in your experiments?
I haven't really been experimenting. I just eat meat, and like I follow the Anthony Chaffee method: eat meat and let my body handle the rest. So yeah, I'm not qualified to talk about ratios very much, so I'll drop out. But I get on well with 25% fat mince, but I get on well most of the time. So yeah, sorry, nothing to add.
Makes sense. Yeah, Stephen, what's your take on too much protein?
Well, it's individual. I think all this way of eating is very much trial and error. So if you take an egg or you take a ribeye, and by weight you look at the ratio of protein to fat, it's 1-to-1, which is pretty much perfect. And if you do it by calories, that mythical measurement of heat that people seem transfixed on, it's about 66% fat and 34% protein. Also, actually, if you look at the whole ribeye, 70% water, by the way. But anyway, how can you eat too much protein? Well, somebody in the chat has already said, if you don't have fat, you end up with rabbit starvation, which is a real thing where people have lived on rabbits and then been ill because they're not getting enough essential fatty acids. But that's not really realistic in the way we are talking, because most of us here will be eating lamb, pork, poultry, duck, having eggs and all those sort of things. And there's plenty of fat in that. So I don't think it's really that easy to eat too much protein. But I think if you look at your body composition and how you look and feel and how you're sleeping, that should be your gauge, really. So I would just go out with whole foods. I wouldn't add a stick of butter, or I wouldn't add, I always use this. I have this prop. Some people are eating that much butter in a day, and that's fine. If they thrive and feel great, that's excellent. And it's possibly because they've come from a background of calorie restriction and fat restriction and all that sort of stuff. So in the initial period, your body is soaking up all that fats, normally actually to help with their thyroid. That's the main reason. But I don't think that will be for life. I think they'll need less and less of the sort of stick of butter, and they'll end up just eating real food. And you can eat too much. Of course, you can eat too much of anything, but it's really difficult on this way of eating, because if you eat a ribeye, you're going to feel satiated. You definitely are. The more you do this and your hormones reset and you get more used to eating the proper way. And we said at the War on Health, I think we all talked about this. This way of eating is not what you're adapting to. You've adapted to the wrong way of eating, and now you're eating the right way. And that's the thing. All this stuff around it, all the macros, tracking, apps and all that, you wouldn't need it if from birth we'd all been fed the right stuff. But unfortunately, we've all been fed the wrong stuff and we've had issues. So you have to get on track. No pun intended. So I think just eat the whole food. And if after, say, a month, you're saying, I feel low energy, then up your fats, because fats is a good source of energy. But 1 in 10 people, that won't work. And they'll need a leaner protein approach. So I'm going away from the question because it's a bit too vague. How can one eat too much protein? By not listening to your body. not listening to the reactions, not listening to the results from what you're eating. And protein shakes, things like that, which are isolates, which you neck really quickly. So you don't have the mechanical digestion. You don't have the stretch receptor in your stomach going, whoa, what's going on? Because it's in liquid form. So the more you eat whole, real foods, the less likely you are to eat too much protein. But by the very English of too much, you can have too much anything, too much water, you can have too much salt, you can have too much of anything, because that's what too much means. But it's very difficult to actually do that if you listen to your body.
Yeah, just
Absolutely.
one thing about like Stephen says, it's individual, and listen to your body. And too much protein can be any protein sometimes. I mean, when I was in real trouble winter before last, in indescribable agony, sitting on the sofa, when I'd messed up, I ate a ribeye and was in even worse pain. So for a while, there was probably about, I don't know, a few days at least at the beginning of it, because I started off with a dry fast, but then because I couldn't eat anything. But after that, all I could take was bone broth with lumps of fat in that were rendered down from the tallow. And that was pretty much no protein. It was pretty much sort of 100% fat, really. Probably not. It never is it? But I couldn't take any, of the fat, even from a steak. And so that just shows, there's like that expression that I keep saying that was made up for bipolar people, that autoimmune people are like everyone else, only more so. And it's, if you're in a real massive flare, going on to sort of PKD or whatever is going to heal it up. But for me, I couldn't even take the pain of PKD at the time. So I was on bone broth and fat.
Yeah.
And that was, yeah.
But you are saying that you listen to your body. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But a lot of people wouldn't know that was the cause, because a carnivore diet has been said, okay, right, that's perfect for everybody. And then people go, they have an autoimmune flare, and then they eat a load of steak and they go, it hasn't really improved that much. It probably will in time, but the symptoms won't go down quickly enough. If you dry fast, which is the best, water fast next, just fat floating in bone broth maybe next after that, you'll probably have fewer and fewer symptoms. But in time, absolutely, you can go back to eating a ribeye steak. But it's like, a ribeye steak is fantastic for the human body. So is training with weights. But if you've broken your arm, don't try and train with weights for a while. You've got to let it heal up before you snap it again inside the cast or whatever. So it's the same thing with the gut. Sometimes you have to get incredibly strict to just kick off that healing. That's all.
Fair. Lee, what's your take on protein intakes? Is it something you've ever tracked, looked at, thought about? What's your take?
I've never really tracked it accurately. I think the question's coming from the context of the PKD. So in that context, because it's all really about context, individuals and whatever your needs are and whatever you're trying to deal with and treat perhaps. But with the PKD, I guess any more than 20% of your energy coming from protein is too much. If you're serious about, cancer, if you're serious about autoimmunity and things like that, that's probably too much protein in that context. But in every other context, it's probably more like not enough fat, or like the other guys are saying, just listening to your body, figuring out why it is that you feel the way you feel. I've never really tracked or gone about trying to track accurately macros. I think in the beginning I just aimed for around 50-50. So like Stephen was saying, eggs and a ribeye, I knew I was roughly 50-50, 1-to-1 kind of thing. And then as time's gone on, I've just played around. I've had some free lamb fat trimmings and things like that, and just added it, and just to see how I feel. And I have noticed some benefits. I think again you get that sort of more of a therapeutic event happening when you take on extra fats, or as much fat as you can handle. I guess really that's what it is about finding your individual threshold for fats and proteins, because we're all different. But perhaps in the context of PKD or cancer or something like that, you perhaps want to keep it low, even if you would like to eat more, because that may be advantageous to do that.
Yeah, potentially. It's not my area of expertise, but I'll just add in, I've eaten up to 550 grams of protein for 9 months straight. I didn't get fat. I didn't have chronic elevated blood glucose. I didn't have a higher HbA1c as a result of it. And I know Stephen, a few weeks back, he did this interesting talk and presentation. I think it was on here. about how blood glucose isn't really that impacted by an elevated protein intake. But I completely agree with everything you guys said about, your body will limit you. Now, with me saying, oh, I ate 550 grams of protein, I'm not saying I ate a pound and a bit of meat. I ate about 2.5 kilos of meat a day for 9 months straight. Was it hard to do? Yes, it was really hard to do. I did have to force it in. I did have to use whey protein powder, Greek yogurt. I was making like protein ice creams and things and smoothies, and it was tough. But the thing is, I wanted to see how much I could push the limit and if it was really true that you get fat from eating too much protein. Turns out, which the studies absolutely agree with in terms of what I said, no, it's really hard to do. But with saying that, I think if you have too much protein, then the fat won't almost do its job. So you've got to find that fine balance. Right now, my fat is below 100 grams on average. My carbs are below 50 grams. My protein's about 330 to 350 grams. I'm getting shredded out of my mind, dropping about 2 to 3 pounds per week quite easily. And I'm not particularly hungry. So it has a satiety factor. The study that I mentioned got a group of, I believe, bodybuilders to eat, I think it's 4.4 grams per kilo of body weight per day. And there's other groups and measurements where they've done 3.1, 2.3, and I think 1.5 grams. And interestingly, so this will be in contrast to what everyone else will say online, but it is what it is. The science is what it is. The 4.4 grams of protein per kilo of body weight actually had better body recomposition results than I believe it's the 3.4 or 3.1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight. So you got better results eating more food. So there's obviously something here to be said for eating enough protein. Now, obviously, it's not great for your digestive health if you're forcing down all this meat. I was stuffed all the time, so no wonder why I was so satiated. But it did the job. I didn't get fat. I got in contest shape. I did it the easiest I've ever done in my life. So that's my weird anecdote. And Sean Baker's done the same thing. He's just done lean days, high protein, lean meat. That's how you do it. That's how you get lean. In terms of too much protein, you do have to force it, guys. I'll tell you, you do have to force it to eat too much protein, provided you're eating like Stephen said, the protein and fat. So, mixed animal foods diet. So you're not just eating, 95 or 97% lean beef. You're eating a fattier cut of meat. I don't think you can go too far wrong. But yeah, we'll get to the next question now. I think I've rambled on enough about protein. This is about blood tests, which might be a good question for Stephen if he's up for it. Just, is it worth having a blood test if you're apparently feeling fine?
Probably not. I think, like I say, we covered this at the conference. Why would you go to the dentist if you haven't got any trouble with your teeth? Why would you do that? If there's no pains, there's no bleeding, why would you do that? Just for the dentist to go, yeah, everything's fine. We live in a world where we're told to engage with the medical system constantly. All right. I used to give private blood tests, and clinical presentation is still king. The corny thing I always talk about when it comes to, say, uric acid is I saw people with very high uric acid who didn't have any gout at all, and those with very low uric acid had lots of gout. Just a simple example of how the blood test can be misleading. I even had one person actually say to me, I should have gout. Why have I not got gout? I'm like, because you're reading all the stuff about your bloods and it's not helped you. So there are people that have blood tests and actually they get quizzical that then they've not got the symptoms that they should have because of the blood results. And that is completely putting the cart before the horse. Now, in saying that, people love biohacking in this space. They absolutely love it. The problem is, influencers do it because it gives them good content. I mean, I've just done a gut diversity test, which I'll have results of next week, which I wouldn't do if I didn't have a YouTube channel. But it is interesting. So when I put the results out there, people might say, yeah, I'm going to get that, because they just want to know. And sometimes maybe in this space it's good to do. So you can say to people, bog off, I'm very healthy. There are other tests which I definitely feel you could have if you've had, say, for instance, a very good blood panel, but your doctor is saying you need to be on a statin. I would definitely go and have a coronary artery calcium scan, and then you can go back and say, hey, look at this. I've got quite a good CSE score, so I know my heart's all right. So there's lots of individual cases where what I'm about to say next can be wrong. But if you're feeling fine, I wouldn't get a blood test. I know Phil's got his hand up now, so yeah. That's it. I mean, I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. And unless you want a biohack, unless you have a thing you are worried about, I wouldn't do it. And this is someone that, wants to sell a book about blood tests. And, it was part of a big business plan for me doing the private blood test. But I would have people come in and I would actually question why they're doing it in the first place. And very often I would say, you don't really need to do it because you haven't got any symptoms. But they just did it anyway. So I suppose for early detection of serious conditions, maybe, but I don't think that is actually valid because I've not really seen that. I still think symptoms are king.
No, early detection as to whether your GP is a complete blithering idiot, I would say. No, I didn't have my hand up. I was just scratching my armpit like an orangutan. No, absolutely spot on. If you don't need blood tests, but if you do get them, send them to somebody like Stephen to interpret, not your GP.
Fair, yeah. I'll just quickly say I completely 100 wholeheartedly agree with what Stephen said. And exactly what I said to you, Paul, once a week man, about 2 months ago. So we've got the same answer. But does anyone have any different opinion to what we've said about basically just getting a test if you absolutely need a test? Okay, so it's a waste of time. Okay, forget about the test, guys. All right. The next question is from channel member Gazamongo. I can't understand this one, guys. If anyone can interpret what it means, that'd be helpful. So feel free to read it out if you understand or can
find out today.
Phil on this one, I think.
I do know what he's on about.
Yeah. He says it found out today that his gentleman's sausage issue wasn't an STD or an oxalate dump, but autoimmune. I have those fade out eyebrows, Hashimoto test wise, which is the loss of the lateral third of the eyebrow. That's the posh term, the lateral third. There is so many people. The reason I'm jumping in, Phil, sorry, is because I get this all the time. People say, you've got that thing with your eyebrows where they don't go right down the side of your head. And and the reason for that is because if I don't pluck them, they end up being all curly whirly and looking like antennas, so I just trim them a bit. It's not a lack of anything, iodine or whatever. But yes, I think if you look at one of the biggest influencers, Dave Feldman, you will now know that many people probably say to him, you need an iodine test because he has a classic loss of the lateral third of the eyebrow. But if you're worried about Hashimoto's, and I think we've got a question about Hashimoto's coming up from Tom, we'll do that as a double whammy, if you don't mind.
Shall I get left with the gentleman's sausage thing? Just because I always
Phil, Phil, talk about your sausage.
Yeah, okay, I will. Right, I'm just guessing, because you haven't said, that it might be something called balanitis, where you get sort of red spots on the end of your knob. And I had that in conjunction with the rest of the autoimmune things that I had going on. And I thought, oh God, what have I got? Have I got an STD or whatever? And this was like 2009 to 2010. And it just went away with the whole of the rest of the autoimmune issues. Balanitis, it's got itis on the end, so it's inflammatory. With me, it was never painful or anything like that. But yeah, I do remember that. If that's what you've got, and it's got itis on the end, it's inflammatory, and anything else you do will sort it out.
The first bit refers to the glands or bell end in common parlance.
There we go. Yeah. So, yes. Fine.
It always,
thing.
Yeah.
I haven't had
always reminds me. Always reminds me of a.
That's all I'm going to offer.
Sorry, Dick. My favourite joke from Smith and Jones when they did the head-to-head, where Griff Rhys-Jones said, I've been to the doctor and I've gone because there's a funny shaped object in the end of my cock. And he went, well, that's your body.
Very
Anyway,
good.
sorry. Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, Tom J.
Tom's question.
Yeah. You see, now the reason I asked that is because it's a nice segue into that last question to this one. How often should one get antibodies tested with Hashimoto's? Asking because I don't want to waste too much money. Now, that is a perfect reason to get a blood test. If you've got Hashimoto, well, the first thing is to get the initial diagnosis and then your treatment worked out. So there are antibodies, TPO and TG antibodies. They're just enzymes, proteins that are a part of the functional unit of the thyroid. What happens is the colloid and the iodine and all the cofactors are brought together by these two things, TPO and TG. And if you have antibodies in your in your test, basically on your blood test, it indicates that you do have Hashimoto's or other autoimmune conditions. So it's good. So it's good for that initial diagnosis, and then you can get your treatment right. Now, how often should you get tested? Now, let's say 3 months into it, you wanted to get a test. That wouldn't be a bad idea if you've changed something or something's changed in your way of living, or you've done a dietary change, or you're trying iodine supplements, or whatever it is, because you will see if it's made a difference. So the mainstream medicine recommendation is normally six months later or 12 months later. And I'm fine with that. But if you have the money to have more regular testing, it's very interesting because you can see the impact of your own interventions. Absolutely. And the reason I'm saying that is because I've seen this hundreds of times. And it's very satisfying to go to this way of eating and see your antibodies decrease. Interestingly enough, some people, when they go onto iodine and they've been seeing a decrease in the antibodies, start to see an increase in the antibodies. But there's a lot of nuance to that, and I'm not going to waffle on too much. But if people are interested in that, then they can email me. There is a reason why that happens. Doesn't mean you're going the wrong way, by the way, because it's all to do with ratios and other readings as well. So initial treatment, then maybe 3 months later, if you've changed something, if there's any changes in how you are, or there's some medication changes or other conditions, I would get tested to see if the doctor says, oh, by the way, you need to take XYZ medication, I would 2 weeks later have a test to see how that medication is messing up or helping your thyroid condition. So yeah, you're not wasting money if you've got Hashimoto's and you're trying to work out what you're doing and if it's making any difference and improving the situation.
Could I just put a little caveat in about that? And that is that I've seen people with Hashimoto's and Graves both go to a carnivore diet, and the antibody tests and the other tests, T3, reverse T3, TSH, whatever, they go a bit nuts in the short term. I don't think they go nuts. I think it's exactly what the body is supposed to be doing. But if you take those results to your GP, then they will say, oh, that's scary. You've got to come off that diet. It's doing terrible things. Whereas it balances out in about 3 months, 4 months, whatever. It balances out. But I've had people say to me, listen, I've got these blood tests and I'm really, really panicked. And I say, well, how do you feel? Go, well, loads better, feeling great. Well, don't worry about the blood test then. Or again, send them to somebody who understands them within the context of a carnivore diet, like Stephen. Don't let your GP fearmonger you into turning around and eating loads of pizza again, because you're damaging your thyroid with your species-specific ancestral diet.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any kind of take on testing for Hashimoto's?
On that, just on what Phil said there, I mean, that is absolutely true. And I also get that at least once a week, somebody freaking out because someone has interpreted the data incorrectly. So that is very important. You've got to get someone to read them that knows what they're doing in the context of this way of eating. But I would have to say, when you start seeing those antibodies going down, and anyone tries to argue about this way of eating, it's really compelling empirical data to go, well, actually, you're wrong. Because look at this, and here's the proof. And I'm thinking of one particular person, Sally, who I used to work with at Steak and Butter Gang. You know, her antibodies going down. She just wanted to tell everyone about it because it just shows that this stuff works. What we're doing does the right thing.
Excellent. All right, we're going to continue now with the questions, guys. Just so everyone knows, if you want to subscribe to our channels or what we do, Phil does have a channel, which is just Phil Escott. Coach Stephen, which is, I believe, Coach Stephen or Coach Stephen Thomas BSc. Lee Coppus is Kent Carnivore, and I am Carnivore Muscle. And Ben, I don't think he has a channel related to carnivore stuff, but do follow him, and he's affiliated with the Big Fat Challenge, which is Phil and Ben's personal private endeavor. Anyway, got a question here about these are quite tricky to link to this talk, but Mama Cracker has one, which is, would fasting be more conducive to healing leaky gut? We've not answered this question quite a while, and I quite like it because we can go into quite a bit of detail, but perhaps I'll start with Phil. What's your take on healing leaky gut and fasting of different kinds?
Well, I think the main thing about fasting, if you've got sort of some horrendous symptoms from something autoimmune, is that the symptoms will go down very quickly because there's nothing to go through the leaky gut. However, it depends what your diet was, whether you have enough nutrients to rebuild that leaky gut, which is, I think, why Sophia Clements always says that she doesn't approve of fasting. Because a lot of people don't have enough nutrients to rebuild whatever they're trying to rebuild while they're fasting. But it can be amazing for taking away the symptoms, and obviously at a mitochondrial level, it can do some wonderful things. But it entirely depends how well nourished you are, and that's very difficult to tell. So that's different from person to person. It will give you tremendous relief, and I think very often, so if somebody wants to go into a carnivore diet cold turkey, if they're in a lot of pain, it can be useful to fast for a few days to start with, just to show them that it is to do with food. You know, because if you take all the food out, the symptoms go away. That doesn't mean to say the gut is completely rebuilding. But I think, again, it's personal, and that's the sort of thing you'd want to be getting a consult with one of us about what stage you're at. Take a proper personal history to see where you're at, what meds you've been on, how damaged the gut might be before you go into a carnivore diet. Yeah, there we go. Depends.
For Ben, do you have a different take at all, or pretty much the same?
No, nothing to add.
What about you, Lee? What's your take on healing leaky gut and different fasting methods?
Not too much to add, really. It's a great reset, isn't it? That's that, and I agree. You know, depends what diet you're coming from. You know, if you've come from a vegan diet, I mean, that's just, you want nourishment, and so you don't want to be fasting from things that your body's craving. So, yeah, it all depends. If you're on a carnivore diet and you think, oh, you know, I'm still struggling, whatever, you could use it as a reset for a few days and then jump back on the horse again, kind of thing.
Fair. Stephen, what do you think about healing leaky gut and fasting?
I think therapeutic fasting like this is, you know, it's perfect, really. Even from a very basic point of view, where it's letting your gut have a day off from digesting. I mean, it rebuilds very quickly the whole interior. If you look at the interior material there, which is, I think if you flatten it out, it's something like the size of a tennis court, huge amount of absorption goes through that. It completely rebuilds within 4 to 5 days. So I think if you fast, you're giving it a day off from that turnover. So I think just on the mechanics, I think it's going to be conducive. And as I think Phil said, you know, you're not putting anything in that maybe is troublesome, that your body's having difficulty with, because you're not eating anything at all. You've got an amino acid pool, so you're not going to be low on essential fats and amino acids. So yeah, I think it's going to be beneficial. I think just too many people have tried fasting and seen good benefits from it for it to not be conducive. Conferring a benefit.
We need Richard in here right now.
Yeah, I did that for Richard because he's not here.
Yeah, my take's pretty much the same as you guys. I prefer intermittent dry fasting. I'd rather do a 20-hour dry fast than a 2 to 3 day wet fast, personally. Less stress in my life, easier to follow. I just got to think, okay, don't eat or drink anything for about less than a day. And in my experience, that's given me a great healing benefit if I've eaten dodgy foods, perhaps a miscellaneous curry of some sorts, or something which is typically off limits. Generally spices I've noticed, and medication mess up my gut the most. In a lot of cases, I know Phil probably would appreciate me saying this, but when you actually stop taking some pain medication, you end up noticing, well, I probably don't need it. I just need to do a fast for a bit. And that will reduce a lot of pain for a lot of people anyway, because like the guys have said, you're just getting rid of all the crap out of your body. Meds do not do me any favors, and I've worked that out over about the last 6 years of being on heavy opiates. Well, not so much the last year or so, but yeah, I've definitely worked out the meds are very contraindicated for me. Not medical advice. I got a question about cystic fibrosis sufferers. Just a hand raise if anyone has had the experience of this with anyone on the carnivore diet. Go on, Phil.
Yeah, I replied in the chat, but I think it's a really interesting one. You know, a lot of people are told they're going to die very young with this, but there was one particular case I know of, Jeremy Tomley, and in 2016 he came over to England with Jack Cruz. He was like a big devotee of Jack Cruz, and I was speaking with Jack Cruz at an event in London, and Jeremy is I just love this guy. I love Jeremy Tomley. You sort of get in his aura and you just want to hug him. He's like the nicest guy in the world. He's so sweet. And I mean, he looks amazing. You know, he looks really sort of exotic with his sort of shaved bits at the side, dreadlocks coming down, ripped climber. He's amazing. All he is very slightly wheezy, but he reckons with Jack Cruz's protocols of sort of CT, carnivore, getting loads of sun, loads of grounding and whatever, and some other things that he added, he has almost learned to breathe through his skin. So he's sort of he's supplementing his oxygen that he would perhaps not be able to get from his lungs. But he was told that he'd be in real trouble, and he just seems to get better and better. It hasn't completely gone, but he has an incredible life, incredible lifestyle. He's really active, looks incredible, and I would say, of course, I think it goes back to Ken Berry's wonderful meme that I put up as part of my talk at the War on Health, where he says, look, you know, substitute proper human diet for carnivore diet and then ask the same question. Do you think the proper human diet would be good for thyroid, cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis? Yeah, it could be. It's not a magic bullet for everything, but on a diet level, absolutely. You know, and then you might need to do some other stuff. You know, cystic fibrosis is a persistent thing, and you would probably need to do an awful lot right every day to be as successful as Jeremy Tomley. But if you look him up, if you Google him, you'll probably find him, Jack Cruz and Jeremy Tomley. You know, Google it together, you'll find certain bits of his story. But I've met him, and he's just lovely, amazing, great story. Pretty much on a level with Andrew Scarborough, who was talking at our conference. You know, with his glioblastoma recovery, just really lovely, really lovely. So yes, of course, it would be beneficial.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any take on cystic fibrosis? I don't come across it myself. No.
Not really.
Okay. Yeah. The next question's from Olivia667. Are there any benefits of Slippery Elm supplement to help heal the gut alongside carnivore diet? Thank you. I'll say I couldn't say, but I say when I worked in a vegan health food shop, generally it's the older population that would buy it and keep buying it for what it's worth. So it's like from what it sounds like, it's more like, you know, oh, if you take this, you know, it'll be good. Like, you know, like the grannies that come in and buy like the 500 milligram tablets of glucosamine think it's going to fix their joints. The reality is you need about 3+ grams of it, and the effect is mostly on the gut lining anyway, rather than the joints. And even then, it's not reparative; it's more just preventative. So I couldn't speak about it myself, but if anyone's got any experience, just feel free to chime in.
Well, you know, if you look at what it is, it's just polysaccharides and water. I mean, that's it. I mean, trees are essentially glucose that we can't eat. I mean, it really is that simple. So you get this sort of grey, sticky substance in the bark, and it's not just from that one tree, by the way. And when you look at what the chemical composition is, it's just sticky polysaccharides in water. So it's slippery. I mean, that's a thing. So if you consume it, I suppose many people might say, well, it's sticking to your gut lining and making things slip through, but that's not what you want. But it's possibly, if you were living in the tribes where the tree is there and you're taking it straight from the tree and there's no processing and it's not being put in a bottle and it's not had all this other stuff stuck to it, maybe, you know, and if there's a stomach upset, it's going to help within 3 or 4 days to get rid of that stomach upset. So I think it's one of those things where plants have been medicinal and probably used in the right way at the right time. It's helped, but then those people that I've just mentioned wouldn't be eating all the other stuff that, you know, people going into Holland and Barrett's are eating. You know, they're probably eating quite a whole food diet anyway. So personally, if someone came into my health food store and said, I want to try that, the first thing I would say, well, what is the things you're eating first? Because maybe we should take those out before you waste your money on a supplement that's just going to be literally a Band-Aid. It's just something that's going to make you feel a bit better and deal with the symptoms rather than the cause. And I think that's, but if, you know, if someone's, I'll say this, if, like you just said, people buy it a lot. If it's working for somebody, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's the polypharmacy thing, isn't it? Nature's polypharmacy. I mean, the way I look at it, exactly what you said, really. The fewer plants we eat, the fewer plant medicines we need to counteract the effects of the plants that we ate.
Yes. Yeah. But it's a great question because, you know, it is a sort of quite a nuanced sort of supplement. But I would guarantee that if you bought it, it's stuff full of other stuff, really.
Yeah.
I prefer turkey tail mushroom for that kind of thing. It seems to show more promise in different studies. Other things I'd look at way ahead of that in terms of the hierarchy of what I'd look at first. I'd just look, this isn't medical advice, but I'd look at BPC 157. I'd look at sodium butyrate and kind of a food in a way. I'd look at bone broth as well. Beyond that, I wouldn't personally bother with that too much. So I'll probably use those in that kind of hierarchy, perhaps. Can't go too wrong with real food, but these sort of additive things, I mean, you got to get rid of the problem. I know everyone in this panel pretty much has said this already. If you get rid of the problem, eventually the body will heal itself. You're just looking for that 1%. And oftentimes these products are really expensive and they don't give you much bang for your buck. Now, some of the things I mentioned are expensive, but they do work. There's more anecdotes on them, and there are clinical trials on BPC 157, and there's absolutely some benefit to sodium butyrate supplementation. But I'd prefer to see someone take it from butter just because it's cheaper. A block of butter nowadays is what, £2.50 or something. And that would last most people 2 or 3 days, depending on how big they are, what the goals are. So I'd look at that way before all this sort of stuff. We've probably got time for one more question, guys. Ben, did you want to choose one from the chat at all?
Whoa. I mean, we've got one autoimmune related. So can coffee or seafood trigger autoimmune? Not that I know of, but anyone else?
Lectins, coffee, right? There's got to be some lectins in there. So,
I mean, Richard, talk about lectins.
Well, I think the worst shades, aren't they? Lectins, the glycoalkaloids and things like that. I think associated with permeability and things like that, leaky gut. But seafood, they're partially polluted, some of the seafood that we eat, and so I think there's lots of minerals in it, but you're not getting anything in addition to what you can get from meat.
There are lectins in coffee, but not as much as in other beans. But lectins are also reduced or destroyed by heat, which is they often come into contact with.
It depends what stage you're at, doesn't it? I mean, some people don't notice much effect from coffee, and some people it wrecks them. It depends what state your gut's in. You know, if your state, if you know, if this is an autoimmunity episode and you have autoimmunity, then really don't take any coffee. It's a plant toxin. And seafood trigger autoimmune. Lee's right. There's a letter about this. I said, well, you know, why don't you recommend seafood? And she said, you know, most of it is just sort of cut up farmed fish, packaged in plastic, and it's got dyes in it to make it look more pink. And I said, well, what about, you know, if you caught a fish straight out the sea? Absolutely fine, she said. And I think, you know, if you have an autoimmune issue that involves any sort of neuro stuff, if you've got MS, Parkinson's, something like that, I think I'll go with Jack Cruz and say really up your seafood consumption. But that means small oily fish, oysters, that kind of thing, and not this crap farmed fish. So if you get something wild caught, it's absolutely fine. But the only problem with fish is that if you sort of use it as the sole source of food, it doesn't really have enough fat in it. So, you know, add it to, is something I've said recently, what I've started doing, because I had a load of kippers and sardines left in tins that the missus had sort of stacked up for prepping in the garage, and they were going off a bit. They never go off in those tins, but they were getting toward the sell-by date, you know. So I thought, well, I better eat these. And I was getting a couple of burgers, you know, burger patties that I was making myself, just salt and beef, putting them in with some tallow, frying them up, putting them on the plate. And then there's a load of tallow left. Put in some sardines, smash them up, and then put them on top of the burgers. And it's really nice. And you're getting, you know, you're getting your ruminant meat, you're getting your enough fat, and you've got the seafood component in there without getting farmed fish. But the farmed fish are horrendous. I mean, the things that they feed those fish. I mean, honestly, I just, you know, when I go out and fish and catch some trout sometimes, and I just never kill them and take them home anymore if they're stocked, because I've done it a couple of times and the meat is just disgusting, and there's something horribly wrong. If they get stocked, you've got to wait a few years for them to have fed on naturals and insects and whatever, you know, before the meat comes back in again. You can see it in the quality of the meat. And just don't eat those farmed fish. They're revolting.
Yeah, I'll give my take quickly on caffeine and seafood. I think coffee dehydrates you. Oftentimes, if you use quite a potent source of it, it's high in magnesium. So I know the guys joke about magnesium shit rate. Well, any magnesium will draw water to the lower digestive region, and that will make your bowels explode to some degree. Now, like Phil said at the very start of his explanation, it's very individual specific, so you couldn't say how much coffee would impact someone. So it is a dehydrating compound, and it will leach B vitamins from your body a lot quicker than not having it. So it's probably not helpful for autoimmunity. Especially in times of stress, you need all the B vitamins you can possibly get. When it comes to seafood, it could do, it could also not. The main drawback I see from seafood outside of potential toxins, I'll say potential because not all seafood is toxic. I'll say that it is lower in glycine compared to, say, ruminant meat. Obviously, glycine helps form collagenous tissues throughout the body, and that's especially true in the gut area. So if you're eating a diet of mostly oily fish, great, you got lots of omega-3, but you know, you get the element of not having as much glycine in your diet, which helps build up your intestinal region and skin, hair, nails, things like that. So I don't think there's an absolute diet, but I think most of us will probably agree it's something about 70-80% plus ruminant meat. The rest being whatever you tolerate as an animal food that doesn't kill you, basically. And if you're me, you have to drink milk because you're still a big baby. So there we go.
Good stuff.
Nice.
Right,
Does anyone else have any take on it? I'm pretty much done if you guys are done.
Good. I'm good.
Nice one. Well,
yeah, I mean, if there could we just do a quick one? There is one down here that could be important for autoimmunity. To follow on from the food one, just how much water should one consume in a day? Should we do that as the last one and then sign off? Because that might be good to add to.
Yeah, we'll all say the same thing. Go on. Same as every week. There we go.
Yeah.
I have got to go because it's 8 p.m. and I've got a coaching, so I've got to go. Anyway,
all right, mate.
Sure. Cheers, Stephen. Take care.
Bye.
See you later. Yeah, just a quick one on the water. It's really, really simple. Drink some good water, whether it's some good mineral water or something, distilled and remineralized, and drink according to thirst and stop when you're not thirsty anymore. The more animal fat you eat, the more good animal fat, the more the body will, the cells will be producing their own deuterium depleted water. So you won't need to drink so much. But if you drink a whole load of water in the day, force yourself to do it, you'll be stripping yourself of minerals and filling yourself up with deuterium. And so drink the minimum amount that will quench your thirst. That's it.
Absolutely. Well said. I can't add anything to that. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'm going to just go through our channels right now, just so everyone knows who we are. I'm Jonathan from Carnivore Muscle. Ben, affiliated with Phil Escott. Phil Escott channel is Phil Escott, as it shows on the screen. They're from the bigfatchallenge.com. They recently did an event called The War on Health. Unfortunately, can't watch that or watch back, but you'll hear lots of amazing testimonials about that over the next few weeks, I'm sure. But I recommend checking out the next event. And hopefully, if enough people go to it, it'll provide me more impetus to get off my big backside and go to it and do a little talk, if I'm able. And also, I've got obviously Lee from @Kent Carnivore. His name is not actually Kent; it's actually Lee, which is absolutely incredible, and took me by surprise when I find it out. So there we go. All right.
Yeah,
cheers, guys. Thank you for joining.
We will have some more events coming up. We've got some planned, so follow us and on here, and we'll announce them as it goes along. But I was just having a meeting with somebody today about having one sort of all sorts of ancestral one and camping, bands, great big fire pits to cook your meat over, butchering demonstrations.
A bunch
We've
of
always got something in
carnivores.
Hey?
You're all cannibals, you carnivores. What's wrong with you?
We've always got something in the pipeline, so follow us on here and we'll let you know as they come up.
Cheers, guys. Well, have a good evening if you're watching, or good afternoon or good morning, and take care.